This podcast is part of the Some Buddies Network. You're never alone when you've got some buddies.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Best Darn Diddly Review Show. This is a weekly podcast for anyone who loves The Simpsons or ever has loved The Simpsons, hosted by two dudes that grew up on The Simpsons. My name is Miles, better known as Mr. Most Days Off, and today we are going on a trip, a journey, if you will, through the Viaje, El Viaje, Misterioso de Nuestro, Jomer, which I'm sure I just butchered, but it's the mysterious journey of Homer, and of course, I would never go on this mysterious journey alone. No. Joining me, as always, your co-host with the most, Richie the Whiz Kid. How are you tripping today, Richie?
I am hungry for some chili after watching this episode, Miles.
Are you hungry like the wolf?
Sure, like the coyote, more so or less. I'm really interested to sit back and hear how you're going to describe some of these scenes for the listeners today, because it's going to get a little crazy here. So you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and lean back in this recliner, go grab me a 6-pack of something, and I'm going to throw it back to you, the man, the myth, the Mabel. I says to Mabel all the time. I mean, we do a podcast together. It is Miles.
That's such a random bit of dialogue that makes me giggle every time. But you're not wrong, sir. This is going to be, I think, a challenge, to say the least, in the form of a podcast. Like, I don't know, man. How... It's like, I don't know, tripping without visuals. Like, that's going to be tough, I think. Hopefully all of our listeners have done plenty of drugs and will be able to follow along. Otherwise, woo, this is going to be a ride.
I've never heard of that kind of disclaimer before a podcast.
Yeah, on our podcast, it's very important that you have consumed drugs. Otherwise, it's not going to make a lot of sense. Tell your kids we said that here at Best Darn Diddly. Richie, say something that saves us from a lawsuit.
By drugs you mean insulin.
Don't do drugs, kids.
Just do insulin.
When your parents are looking.
Listen to Johnny Cash's Coyote, always.
If a coyote talks to you with any celebrity voice, I feel like that's going to be sound advice.
Oh, that's not a coyote. It's just a talking dog.
Oh, that makes
Wait a
sense.
minute.
Woof, woof. All right, let's go ahead and start, I guess. Sure. This one, once again, no chalk gag, but it does have a repeat couch gag, which the Simpsons family parachutes safely down to the couch, all except for one, Homer, who we can hear screaming as he falls and plats face first right on the living room floor. We open up and it is breakfast time for the Simpsons, and while the kids eat, Homer is going through the newspaper, and he's very annoyed with certain sections such as world, the arts, and religion. But he gets very excited when he finds his favorite section, kicking back.
Sounds like a good little section in the newspaper, if I do say so myself.
But he's distraught to find that somebody has actually cut parts of his paper out, and he starts looking through the newspaper hole suspiciously at his family members. Lisa and Bart both assure him that it wasn't him. Bart even adds that he's more of a mail tamperer. But Marge is standing there with a pair of scissors.
Don't look at me, just because I'm holding a pair of scissors. Scissors, which I need to gussy up these curtains.
And you can see that Marge is very upset with herself as she has to start clipping away at her own curtains.
Those curtains she's had for 8 seasons now, Miles.
The unchanged, yeah. And clearly, Marge is up to something, trying to keep something from Homer. We're not quite sure, but she's very on edge. And later, when the phone rings, Homer answers.
Hello? Oh, hi, Lenny.
And immediately, Marge gets alarmed and starts vacuuming to try to block out the noise. To try to block out their conversation.
No? Why would I need a ride this afternoon? Where? to the big annual. What?
At this point, Marge is in full panic mode, and she's actually banging the vacuum up against the wall where the phone is plugged in until she actually is able to dislodge the cord from the wall.
Cell phones were still kind of a big, fat, new thing at this point, ladies.
Literally big and fat at the time. Like,
That's
they
what
would
I
not
meant,
fit
yeah.
in your pocket.
Lenny? Oh, well. If it was big and annual, I'm sure they'd have mentioned it in the newspaper. You know what I liked in that scene, too, was like when they first cut to the scene in the living room, Marge is on the couch actually sewing up the curtains she had just cut.
Oh my goodness, I didn't even catch that. I love that so much. That's great. I really enjoy just the little bit of simple dialogue here because Homer is literally dangling Santa's little helper from like a chew toy that he's hanging suspended in midair from. And he says out loud, it's just a lazy dog dangling afternoon.
This is one of those things where I did not remember it was from this episode, but I do that all the time. This and the Mabel line I use all the time. And it's one of those things, again, where it's like just so in my DNA at this point that I didn't even remember the episode, but I always picture Santa's little helper dangling from that thing. When I don't want to go do something, I go, just a lazy dog dangling afternoon.
See, when you first said that, I didn't think you were referring to the line. I thought you were saying you like to dangle dogs frequently.
It's kind of odd. Let's just agree to move on.
Homer notices that Marge is acting a little bit strange. For one, she's smoking in the living room, and Homer notes that she doesn't usually do that.
Well, I just feel like filling the house with the rich, satisfying smell of tobacco.
And Marge actually does the classic, takes a deep inhale and exhales it straight at Homer, covering him in a cloud of smoke, which actually causes Homer to react in a very normal way for somebody being doused with cigarette smoke. What's wrong? What's wrong with you? What are you trying to hide from me? And Homer actually goes outside for a second. Hey, what's that smell? Marge is starting to panic a little bit at this point, but it's too late because Homer has already started to notice onions, chili powder, cumin, juicy ground chuck. It's chili. Oh my god, I'm missing the chili cook-off. I'm missing the chili cook-off. It's going on right now and I'm missing it.
All right. I was trying to keep it from you, but I had a good reason. Every time you go to that cook-off, you get drunk as a poet on payday.
So Marge reminds him of the events that happened last year, and we jump to a flashback where we see a very drunk Homer who has a beer in each hand, and he's actually swimming around in a cotton candy machine.
Look at me! I'm a puffy pink cloud!
And he goes running around as dogs start licking the cotton candy off him, leaving him, I presume, at some point running around drinking beer naked.
We've had some close calls in our time, Miles. I don't think we've ever had a close call like that one, though.
At this point, we come back to present day where Homer is wasting no time and he's already getting on his chili cook-off attire, complete with these Western boots that he apparently wears just for this event. And I'm already going to declare it. This is my absolute favorite line in the episode when Homer replies, well, of course everything looks bad if you remember it. Now, where are my chili boots?
I love those chili boots, too.
I just love everything sounds bad if you remember it. Oh, too true.
Absolutely.
So Marge finally agrees that they can go to the chili cook-off, but Homer has to promise that he won't have any beer.
Okay, quit nagging me. I won't have any beer. Sheesh, why don't you have a cigarette or something?
And immediately Marge is like, I suppose I could. The addiction is real, people.
Yep.
Careful with that shit. Drugs are fine. Cigarettes are super dangerous.
Oh no, we need some kind of PSA.
We
on
need
this
a
podcast.
disclaimer because the problem is I truly believe that, so I'm not going to correct ourselves at any point. So Kids,
I've never had a cigarette in my life, so I can't go against you.
This is explicit for adults.
For
only,
drugs.
right? Yeah, it's fine.
And chili.
If you got advice on this show to do things you're not supposed to do, it's really your parents' fault, not yours. So have fun, kids.
Go wild in a cotton candy machine.
So the family arrives at the Chili Fest, and I actually really like a lot of the dialogue here and just the surrounding scenery. It's an event that we haven't ever seen before, so especially from the animation department, which if they thought this part was challenging, hold on to your hats. Wait till Act 2. But there's a lot of new stuff to be drawn. Almost everybody in town has their own chili booth. Lisa actually declares, I'm going to go get some vegetarian chili before they get desperate and add meat.
I think that is a Pooh that's got the vegetarian chili too, which would make sense because their shared disdain of meat a few seasons ago.
That's true. I like Bart's very, very honest here.
I'm going to go claim some valuables at the Lost and Found.
And this is where we come by our first stand or booth, and it's actually a little bit of Lenny, which is a craft stand. And actually, Marge seems genuinely happy in this moment to be at this Chili Fest. She really enjoys looking at Lenny's trinkets. And she sees things like a spice rack, which she just cannot believe has 8 spices. I mean, surely some must be doubles. Oregano? What the hell is that?
Marge, we're missing the chili. Less artsy, more fartsy.
Homer, I happen to like handcrafts much more than stuffing my face.
Fine, I'll come find you when I'm ready to stop having fun.
Oh, too true as well. Remember your promise, no drinking.
Stupid pooper.
There you can see where you already know what the rift in this episode is going to be, but we don't get there in quite the way that you think. Homer doesn't really try to break his word. He's very desperate in his moment where he breaks and does drink, but we're not quite there yet. First, it's time for a little bit of public shaming on Marge's part, because she's walking around by herself, and the busybody Helen Lovejoy makes a scene, essentially, or really pokes at Marge in a mean sort of way here.
And he doesn't mean busy body, he means busy bee. And I'll let you fill in the rest of that word. Howdy, howdy, Marge and Homer. Oh, my mistake. Homer's not even with you.
Ouch.
Probably just knocking back a few refreshments.
Thank you for your concern, Helen. Homer isn't drinking today.
Oh, I think it's lovely that he said that, and that you believed him.
And even Reverend Lovejoy is trying to hold back the leash on his wife just a pinch here, because she is going hard at Marge, and Lovejoy chimes in, Now, Helen, let us not glory in Homer's binge drinking. There but for the grace of God goes Marge herself.
Oof.
Man, they hit hard.
Yeah.
Actually, what's kind of interesting about this setup here is, to be fair, Marge has good reason from the past to be suspicious, as do the townspeople. But Homer is legitimately in his element at this chili cook-off without the assistance of alcohol. He seems completely and totally fine. And if anything, he's almost painted in a somewhat heroic light in the way that the other people around town admire it. One of them even calls out at one point, it's like, wow, it's the man that, can eat any
iron stomach.
Yeah, the iron stomach, exactly. Saying that he can basically eat the hottest of chilies, no problem. And again, he's not even had a drop of liquor. All he has is his own handcrafted spoon, which legend has it may have been whittled from an even larger spoon. Homer walks up first to Ned's Firehouse 5-alarm chili, but he's immediately suspicious. 5-alarm chili, eh?
Uh-huh.
He takes a bite. 1, 2... Hey, what's the big idea?
Oh, I admit it. It's only 2 alarm, 2.5 tops. I just wanted to be a big man in front of the kids.
And he's, of course, there with his sons, Rod and Todd. And Todd actually looks at Ned, who's now broken down crying. Daddy, are you going to jail?
We'll see, son. We'll see. Ned's not having a good week here this last week, although I think we might have seen the neighborhood shot earlier. His house was standing, if I remember correctly.
Well, and from an emotional standpoint, he seems to have bounced back significantly in that short week.
Until he was emasculated about his 5-alarm chili.
Marge is having a slightly better time now that she's not interacting with the Lovejoys. She's out by the square dance watching the country dancers, and Waylon Smithers actually approaches her.
Evening, little lady. You reckon a square could get a dance?
It looks so complicated. Do you know how?
Ma'am, I wouldn't honk the honk if I couldn't tonk the tonk.
I really like that line actually a lot, but Smithers actually pulls on his bolo tie, which apparently activates the neon lighting he has stitched into his jacket, which says Hot Nashville Nights on his back. And admittedly, Marge seems impressed by this.
That's typically how it goes, Miles.
I've never tried the lighted jacket to pick up chicks, and to be fair, I don't think that's what Waylon Smithers is trying to do here either.
You've never been into GBM either, but it happens, I guess.
I guess so. We see back with the cook-off, Homer is making the rounds. He's insulting people at this point, saying Moe's bland, timid entry would be suitable for maybe patients recovering from surgery.
Ooh.
But he approaches Chief Wiggum, and Wiggum gets a little bit of an evil look in his eye. He clearly has a plan, and he even says, that Simpson, he thinks he's the Pope of Chili Town.
Well, he kind of is.
Yeah, it seems like, if anything, he deserves that title, right? Ooh. But
wah, wah, wah. Wah, wah, wah.
We get like a Western showdown type of scene happening here as Homer approaches Wiggum. Afternoon, Homer. Care for some chili? I've added an extra ingredient just for you. The merciless peppers of Quetzalcoatl And he
Quetzalcoatl.
And he pulls out a gnarly looking pepper. It's like red and neon green, and it's literally glowing. And literally the entire crowd gasps. Grown deep in the jungle, primeval by the inmates of a Guatemalan insane asylum. As he drops the pepper into the pot, you can see that it starts to kind of sizzle.
Wiggy, my chili's getting cold.
And Homer is so cocky in this moment. And that does not last long, because the absolute moment that the pepper even gets close to Homer's tongue, you can see, and this is actually some great animation right here, going on for the rest of the episode. The animation gets absolutely crazy, but this shot is wonderful as you see the heat from the pepper spread across Homer's tongue, and he immediately starts screaming frantically, running around looking for anything that could help. And the townspeople themselves are actually just erupting in laughter because they kind of are happy to see this cocky guy fall a little bit because he's been a bit up on his own pedestal, so to speak.
Why is he eating the pepper, though? The point is to eat the chili, not the pepper.
And then he eats like 8 of them later, but yeah.
Oh.
Homer immediately goes for a little kid's ice cream cone, but another great shot here because as the heat from his tongue is so hot that he can't actually make contact with the ice cream because it's melting about an inch away from his tongue. So the next best thing he sees is a beer stand, and I actually love the sign. It says proof of age or exact change required. But he goes and he grabs 6 Duffs, and he's about to pour them all into his mouth at the same time to quench the heat. But literally as he's mid-pour, Marge screams out,
Homer!
And he immediately gets distracted by his wife and actually ends up just dumping beer all over himself, which of course gives him the smell and appearance of a drunk without any of the added benefits of being drunk.
Except for the fact that he can't really talk so good right now either.
Yeah, he even sounds a little bit drunk because his tongue is going crazy. But he actually gets help from a very unexpected source. And I will say an uncharacteristically wise Ralph talks to Homer because Homer's about to drink a candle. That's how desperate he is.
Well, he's been drinking water. He's grabbing each cup of water and drinking it, and he puts his hand on a candle because he's not paying attention.
And Ralph chimes in, "Wait, mister, you're drinking a candle. You don't want to get wax in your mouth, do you?"
Maybe I do, son. Maybe I do.
And Homer actually gets a pretty credible idea here, I have to say. Like, you would think in theory this would absolutely work, because he coats his entire mouth in wax, which I think would probably allow you to eat pretty hot things without having the negative results that you would expect, at least while you're eating them. On the way out, it's probably going to be absolute hell, but unless you coat your butthole in wax too.
Yeah, but also there's the part where you accidentally swallow a little bit of wax.
Yeah, but a little bit of wax is going to hurt you.
We'll see. I mean, maybe that's the wax mixed with the peppers caused some pretty crazy stuff to happen, so.
I'm pretty sure it's just the Guatemalan insanity pepper, but hey, maybe I'm wrong.
His special drink had a special ingredient. Maybe his special pepper does too. Special pepper.
Either way, Homer's idea has given him a refreshed sense of confidence, and he staggers up to Wiggum's booth again. "Hey, everybody, look who's back! It's the big baby! Oh, this porridge is too hot! Oh, wah, wah, wah!"
Then Homer hands a spoon to Wiggum, not saying a word.
While the crowd continues to laugh at him, and he just has that stone-cold look. "Want some more, do you? Well, sure. Heck, it's not my job to talk people out of killing themselves."
Oh my God.
Oops. Maybe he should reread that job description again.
I also want to say, Wiggum has a huge pot of chili, and if Homer can't handle the chili, nobody else is going to be able to. So who are you making this much chili for?
He literally ruined all of the chili for everyone else just so he could get his vengeance on Homer, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But this time, to everyone's surprise, Homer eats the chili no problem, and he even asks for more.
More, please.
Wiggum actually gives him 2 peppers this time, and he just downs them rapid fire. Good Lord, this can't be happening.
By all medical logic, steam should be shooting out of his ears.
His ears, if we're lucky. So I will go ahead and stop and note real quick that the Simpsons writers wanted to make sure that they found a solid reason for Homer to essentially trip balls, which he's going to do in the second act, spoiler alert. But they didn't want him to actually consume drugs. They wanted to have some outside reason other than Homer getting high, because they just didn't feel like that really fit the character at all.
Right.
Even though the inspiration for this episode has actually been pitched around for years by the legendary Simpsons writer George Meyer, who just loved the idea of Homer going on a mystical journey. And a lot of that has to do with his own experiences in college, along with some of his friends who actually visited Mexico and with a shaman went on a mystical journey of their own. And he just thought that this would be a great, great idea. It wasn't that anybody at The Simpsons specifically didn't like the idea, but for whatever reason, just through other ideas, it always ended up getting sort of pushed to the side. And it was actually Matt Groening himself who rescued this idea and really wanted it to come to fruition, because he enjoyed the idea so much. So this was combined with this chili festival idea that had kind of been floating around on its own separately, and they thought that a Guatemalan insanity pepper would be a perfect replacement for recreational drugs.
Hey, I'm glad they didn't force it. They just let it kind of come about. So, I mean, even as a kid, I was like, I understand that he wasn't taking drugs, but I mean, that's a dangerous pepper, Miles.
It is a dangerous pepper.
I could see it working out this way.
And even with the revised way that they did it, where there was no drugs involved, it still did divide the Simpsons writers' room to some extent. There were definitely people that did not like the idea of them pursuing this essentially drug trip script, which is it's honestly what it is if you're being real. But all of that information did come from the commentary, which I have neglected to mention so far, but it did feature the voices of Josh Weinstein, George Meyer, Matt Groening, Jim Reardon, and actually in a very minor role, but still an interesting one, Josh Weinstein's children, Molly and Simon, were both in the room. And just to give you an idea of their age, neither of them were alive when this episode originally aired. It was fascinating to see the parts that they would laugh at, and they actually legitimately asked questions throughout the commentary. And it's really fun to see The Simpsons having an impact and finding a show funny, or kids finding a show funny, even though, again, definitely past their time. And I don't think that they would understand the drug references at all, but they still get a kick out of a talking dog, for instance.
I don't know. It's like, when I was a kid, I understood that it was like a drug trip episode, but I was probably...
When you were like 6, though?
Well, this episode aired when I was like 12.
Right, that's different. It's
Yeah.
like you're basically a teenager at that point.
Yeah. Fine.
Back to our chili festival, though, it's very clear that while Homer was able to handle the heat of these peppers are still very much having some sort of an effect on Homer, because he's starting to freak out just a little bit, and he approaches his good buddy Ned Flanders and is basically begging him for help.
Well, before that, he actually got one really funny line in to Wiggum, where he said, "Well, Chief, don't quit your day job,
Whatever that is."
But he just called him Chief.
Yeah, that is a really great line. And as he walks away, again, he's trying to kind of play it cool in front of Wiggum, not letting him know that his chili had any effect on him at all. But he's very clearly freaking out when he approaches Ned Flanders. "Please, Ned, you gotta help me."
"Well, sure, buddy. I'd be happy to help out. What can I do?"
And Ned's face starts to sprout additional mustaches, and then his mouth starts to just spread all over the screen, and Homer is clearly losing his mind. We see Jasper, who actually says "goo goo gajoob," which is a reference to the Beatles song "I Am the Walrus," which is a well-known trippy... It's a song that people are known to do drugs and listen to. We get a nice little rendition of Nelson's "Ha Ha" that has a much more parrot-like sound effect to it.
Ha 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 ha!
Edna Krabappel comes across more like the teachers from the Peanuts cartoons, the Charlie Brown cartoons. Wah, 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 wah. And finally, Barney lets out an incredible belch that turns into one of my favorite bits of animation in the episode. This is where Homer is starting to lose touch with reality, and Barney, one of his best friends, starts to change dramatically, which I've been there, not with a person, but with my dog. But we'll get to that later. For now, Homer is hit full on freak out, and he actually screams and runs through a wooden fence. Ralph, once again, they're uncharacteristically observant and also helpful as he yells out, "Hey, mister, do you need some help?" But Otto is right there to offer some, I would say, guidance from personal experience.
"Let him go, Ralph. He knows what he's doing."
And we fade to black as Homer continues to scream and run. And that brings us to the end of our first act. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break, but we'll be back with a very trippy Act 2. So don't go away, man.
And now it's time for our favorite part of the show. What's that say? Ads and sponsorship. Ugh, this is gonna be a real nightmare. Okay, what do you got for me? Patreon.com? What the hell is that? And they just give us money for it? Oh, if only we had that around in the 70s. Make sure you ask your mommies and daddies to send money to bestdarndiddly at patreon.com so they can drive a dump truck full of money up to our houses. Uh-oh. I said the loud part quiet and the quiet part loud.
We come back for our second act, and holy bonkers, things are already out of control. Everything from the animation perspective. Trippy is really the only word to describe it. I mean, it is,
Voyage?
If you've done hallucinogens, it has some very similar effects that you might have experienced in the past. Things move, they have tracers, they don't look quite normal, they have different colorscapes, they have different energies to them. Some things move that shouldn't, some things talk that shouldn't. There's a lot happening in this episode.
Sounds like it, man. That's you say it was George Meyer's idea? He must have been able to get some very detailed occurrences to remember this kind of stuff.
So, from the commentary, that was George Meyer is one that had the idea, is one of the people that brought the main idea to this. He didn't technically write this one, I don't believe, but Jim Reardon did direct this one, and on the commentary, he was asked about how did the animation come to be on this episode, and Jim Reardon has a little bit of a dry sense of humor sometimes, so this was actually pretty funny on the commentary. He very calmly explained, well, let's see, I took the idea to David Silverman, and I said, hey, David, would you like to draw this? And he said yes.
Fair enough.
And that was the entirety of information we got from the animation side of things. No, apparently, though, David Silverman really did just dive right into this. He absolutely loved it. He got to play around with a lot of different art styles that he doesn't usually get to use on The Simpsons. And he really got to make it his own because, really, Homer having an hallucinogenic trip hasn't been done before, and there isn't really a lot of parameters that are in place whenever you're drawing that. So from an artistic standpoint, David Silverman found it very fulfilling and really enjoyed this episode a lot.
There's no lines that you have to color in between on this. You get to pretty much do whatever you want.
So Homer is kind of wandering around this dreamscape, and he's trying to figure out what the hell is happening. I do enjoy the line at one point he acknowledges, man, this is crazy. I hope I didn't brain my damage. Classic.
And that's when, like, he's facing one way, and then his, like, front face becomes his back face, and they just kind of morph through each other.
His face, like, phases through his head to take part on the other side, which is a reoccurring thing. Homer straight up has what I would say at this point...
He must be in Shelbyville, Miles.
He does wonder where he's at and thinks Shelbyville might be a possibility, though I don't remember Shelbyville having giant snakes that attack you or hiss at you and wrap you up. And I also don't remember being able to control the sun in Shelbyville, but hey, maybe I just haven't been there recently.
Sun goes up, sun goes down. Sun goes up, sun goes down. Sun goes up, sun goes down.
Homer is still playing with the sun, and he actually gets to the point where he does it a little too much and ends up shattering the sun. Note to self, stop doing anything. I like that line a lot, but it also very much reminded me in a lot of ways of the Treehouse of Horror episode where he time travels with the toaster.
Yep, that's the exact feel I got from it as well.
Yeah, and I mean, you can kind of see some similar ideas, and even to some degree, I mean, whenever you're getting to experiment with drawing the past, you also have less parameters on your animations than you normally would, and especially alternative realities that you get into in the present. But this definitely had more of a LSD style of effect to it.
I'll take your word for it.
Good stuff. I recommend it to everybody. While Homer is tripping balls, Marge is back in the real world, so to speak, and at this point she's becoming more concerned than anything, but it's
nighttime at this point.
Yeah, she's trying to find her husband. The Chili Fest is coming to an end, everybody's leaving, and Homer's nowhere in sight. Has anybody seen Homer?
Marge, better you should hear it from me than some gossipy neighbor. Homer made a total jackass of himself.
Lovejoy once again pipes in, Helen, that's enough. Call off your dogs.
But someone had to tell her, and I got here first.
That, I feel, is the most honest thing that Helen Lovejoy has said on the show to date.
I noticed that while they're having this exchange with Marge, that it looked like a Mr. or Dr. Nick Riviera was walking by in the background, and it looked like he had a date that he was taking home, Miles.
Was it Princess Cashmere?
I thought it was her at first, but when I rewound it, I could not tell if it was her or not. It might have just been some rando.
Interesting. Well, I mean, he's got doctor money. I'm sure he's on the dating scene periodically.
What's that? Doctors get paid?
Marge is also a little upset with what she's discovering in that she pretty much assumes that Homer's been drinking at this point. She even says, no beer, huh? I guess I know what a promise from Homer J. Simpson is worth.
I mean, you can't really blame her right here.
Well, that's the interesting thing, because again, really in this case, it's more of a misunderstanding than anybody really truly being at fault. But at the same time, you can completely understand why Marge was so quick to jump to the conclusions that she jumps to, just because of all the shit that Homer has actually done in the past, versus this. I don't think you can really be mad at him for going crazy on an insanity pepper that he didn't intend to go crazy on, but yeah, it's definitely a complicated issue.
I mean, all he had to do was stop at one.
True, he did have to go back and try to get
8.
the better of them. He ended up eating 8 of them.
Yeah.
And we visit back with Homer and his chili trip, and he's busy spelling out the word help with rocks, and he gets really mad when one of the rocks starts to crawl away. Hey, buddy, get back there with the other rocks!
It's not a rock, though, Miles, is it?
He's surprised to see that it's actually a tortoise, and as the tortoise crawls, it's actually leaving him a message.
Follow the...
Homer comes to a realization, and he's starting to think that this is his moment of glory.
This must be why I'm here. Follow the what? Follow the what? Hurry up!
But as the tortoise very painfully slow spells out his message, it turns out it says, follow the tortoise.
Don't!
And I love that dough so much because
Yes.
in his trippy state, you actually see the word form and smoke, much like you would in a cartoon.
No, I really always like that dough. That's some good animation.
Mm-hmm. Homer is very frustrated as he has to slowly and painfully walk along with his tortoise. He's basically like insulting it, telling it to hurry up, and even kicking it at times. At one point, straight up like drop kicking it across the desert.
He rockets that thing.
Yeah, he uses his drug-addled strength to kick it further than he normally would be able to.
But it works.
It does work, and he actually follows it right up to what appears to be a very small pyramid.
Oh, you want me to climb that, huh? No problemo.
But right as he says, no problemo, the pyramid starts to rumble, and it suddenly bursts from the sand and grows to at least 4 times its original size.
Oh, this is because I kicked you, isn't it?
And I love here that the tortoise just looks at Homer and nods. Take that, dick.
Yeah.
Once again, back in the quote-unquote real world, I think that the rest of the Simpsons are in the fake world and Homer's the one in the real world, but hey, that's just like my opinion, man.
All right, calm down there, Inception.
Back in the non-drug-fueled world, the Simpsons are driving home, and Bart is very amused by a hat that he purchased at the festival. It says time for chili, and it has an actual working clock in the middle of it. Lise, check it out! It's time for chili!
I saw it, Bart.
You're just mad because there's no clock in your hat.
What hat?
Lisa isn't wearing one. This baby's wasted on an idiot like you. Where's Homer?
You're father decided he'd rather come home in a taxi or a police car.
We cut back again to Homer's world and see that he has actually finished climbing the pyramid. And on top, we find his one true love, Marge Simpson, waiting there at the top with her back turned to him. But it's very clearly her.
Marge! Oh, thank goodness I found you!
But
Marge?
something's not quite right here, because as Homer is trying to get Marge's attention, he's actually starting to run circles around her, and she never actually moves, but he also never actually sees her front. It's always perceptually her back to him, which is another just amazing bit of animation, the way that they drew this out.
Fight fair! I never do this to you!
With those words, a strong wind begins to blow, and what Homer thought was Marge actually begins to blow away as if it was nothing more than just sand.
Ooh.
Man, that's dark right there. If you're in a place like that and your anchor disappears, you are in a bad place, my dude.
Is this now a bad trip?
No, I don't know that I would say that. I will say that I've only had in my life what I would consider to be one bad trip, and there's actually a lot of elements of this, specifically this moment, and some of the others in that specific trip. However, even now, looking back on it, like at the time it was terrible. I thought I had like broken myself and got lost in essentially the upside down, or like whatever they go to in the in that movie Get Out. Like, that's basically what I felt like. But looking back on it, I actually see it as a positive experience.
Well, there you go. There's Miles for you, Mr. Positivity.
Yeah, man, I learned a lot about myself that night. And Homer's learning a lot about himself, but he seems to be learning more than anything that he needs help, man. And he gets it. Because as he's wondering what the hell he's doing here anyway, he suddenly hears a disembodied voice. You are on a quest for knowledge.
Huh?
And Homer looks up in the sky where the moon, which is glowing brightly, actually turns into a giant eye. And then a planet floats up next to it and also opens into another eye. And
I
suddenly,
like that animation too.
Oh, it's amazing animation, yeah. Then suddenly other celestial bodies float into place and form a coyote face. And that face, I guess, I don't know, it kind of phases from the sky and materializes directly next to Homer.
Fear not, Homer. I am your spirit guide.
And Homer is just kind of like, hiya. And I think it's probably important to note here that this voice is not just any voice, but this is a very special guest star. Homer's spirit guide is actually voiced by Johnny Cash. And this is another one of those Simpsons guest stars that they were pitching names around, and Johnny Cash was at the top of the list, but they never actually thought that they would get him. But turns out he agreed to do it, and he actually came in on Super Bowl Sunday, of all days, knocked out his lines in just a couple of hours, and was an absolute pleasure to work with, and really, really was committed to getting what they wanted from him. He was willing to take direction and get that voice exactly what they were looking for. And he did a great job.
Yeah. But to be fair, there's not that many lines, so it probably didn't take too much work, but that's still really cool.
True. It's not a ton of work, but again, it's neat when you get a name like Johnny Cash, who is now immortalized as a voice in an iconic episode of The Simpsons.
I agree, sir.
The coyote, or Johnny Cash, as I prefer to think of it, explains to Homer, there is a lesson you must learn.
If it's about laying off the insanity peppers, I'm way ahead of you.
I speak of a deeper wisdom. The problem, Homer, is that the mind is always chattering away with 1,000 thoughts at once.
Yeah, that's me, all right.
And you can hear the thoughtlessness inside Homer. Clarity is the path to inner peace.
Well, what should I do? Should I meditate? Should I get rid of all my possessions?
Are you kidding? If anything, you should get more possessions. You don't even have a computer.
You know, I have been meaning to take a spiritual journey, and I would...
And at this point, the coyote is chewing on Homer's pant leg.
Hey, knock it off! Kick.
Oh, sorry, I am a coyote. And I do like a lot about this whole scene. There's a little bit of an allusion to John Lennon's Imagine. I get that sense whenever he talks about getting rid of his possessions. And then immediately the coyote is like, no, you idiot, you barely have anything. That's really fun.
I like that he tells him, give me some inner peace or I'll mop the floor with you.
So the coyote tells him how he can find that peace, and all he has to do is find his soulmate, the one with whom he shares a profound mystical understanding.
That's easy, that's Marge.
But all it takes for the seed of doubt to be planted is just the simple question from the coyote. Is she? And just like that, we cut out of this trippy dream world and we see that Homer is now back in that quote-unquote real world, and he's actually waking up in the middle of a golf course sand trap.
Huh? Golf course? Did I dream that whole thing? Maybe the desert was just the sand trap. Oh, and I bet that crazy pyramid was just the pro shop.
And I don't know why this joke gets me so much, but it cracks me up because the pyramid is actually a pyramid. The pro shop, for whatever reason, sits up top of at least a 40-stair-high pyramid.
It's crazy.
And it looks exactly, of course, like the one out of his dream, as does this random little dog, Homer notes, that's sitting behind, or beside the pro shop, I should say.
And that talking coyote was really just a talking dog.
Hi, Homer. Find your soulmate.
Hey, wait a minute. There's no such thing as a talking dog.
Woof, woof.
Damn straight.
So, once again, the best comedy is inspired by real life because the waking up confused in a golf course sand trap comes from a real-life college experience from friends of Josh Weinstein. Again, they say on the commentary it's friends of theirs. I'm not so sure, but maybe.
Well, his kids were there too. He couldn't admit that.
Exactly. But they talked about a friend that they had in college who actually got so wasted, they woke up on a golf course in a different state. And the only reason they found that out is because after waking up in the golf course, they actually wandered to a gas station, and when asking for a map, they were very surprised that they got one for a different state in which they lived in. Now, this is from up in the Northeast around Harvard, so the states are much, much smaller and much closer together than what we're used to here in Texas. But still, anytime you're drunk enough to not remember crossing state lines, you're having a hell of a night.
Dude, that's a long trip back if you start in Texas and wake up in a different state.
Especially for us, because we're in like north central Texas. Like literally, it's at least 2 hours. I'd say an hour and a half for either of us to get to Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And
is that really another state?
Yeah, that's barely another state. I mean, to go to like New Mexico, it's like 13 hours. It's nuts. I'm not even exaggerating.
Oh, maybe by like an hour.
Homer wanders his way back home, and he sees his kids having the most random of conversations in the kitchen. Bart is talking to Lisa.
So then I says to Mabel,
and when Homer walks in, hey kids.
I'll finish this later. Hi, Dad.
Where's your mother?
Out back.
And Homer walks out so Bart can continue the conversation.
So anyway, I says to Mabel,
and we immediately cut to the backyard. So we're never going to find out what Bart said to Mabel. Or who the fuck Mabel is.
I will, I want to know.
In the backyard, we see a very familiar image, but this time it's not the back of Marge because Homer's tripping. It's the back of Marge because she's busy putting away the laundry, but we can see that she noticeably stiffens when she hears Homer approach. And Homer is immediately on walking on eggshell mode.
Oh, I guess you're cranky because I didn't come home last night.
I'm cranky because my husband got drunk and humiliated me in front of the entire town. You broke your promise, Homer.
Oh, honey, I didn't get drunk. I just went to a strange fantasy world.
That'll go over well. Homer tries to explain that Marge should believe him because they're soulmates, but that actually sets off Marge even more. She basically snaps at him saying, "Don't pull that soulmate shit with me." She doesn't quite say it like that, but she might as well have.
Fair enough.
We see the next night, actually, Marge is sleeping alone upstairs, and Homer is pacing around the couch and kind of having a heart-to-heart with himself, trying to figure out if Marge is actually his soulmate. I will point out real quick that we have a quick flash in between the floors. We've seen several variations of this joke in the past, but in this case, in the floor space between the Simpsons' first and second floor, we can see that there are telephone wires that have been wiretaps from various agencies such as the NSA, the National Security Agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the Central Intelligence Agency, the Soviet Secret Police, or the KGB, if you will, and finally MCI, which is just a cable company or a phone company back in the 90s.
When I first saw MCI, it took me a second because I'd completely forgotten about them.
That those were a thing?
Yeah. But I mean, everybody's listening to them.
They have some very popular phone conversations. I imagine that a lot of the explosives have to do with Bart and his cherry bombs.
It's Mabel.
That's what he was saying to Mabel it was.
That's why he's talking to Lisa and not on the phone. He's trying to keep Mabel under wraps.
But Homer is really actually having a very sad moment. He's actually kind of convincing himself that maybe Marge isn't his soulmate. We don't have anything in common. And there's a great joke here where he takes a look at their record cabinet and they actually have it divided into Marge's and Homer sections. Look at these records. Jim Neighbors, Glenn Campbell, the Doodletown Pipers. Now look at her records. They stink. And that was Homer's final straw, I guess, was their difference in taste in music, because outside we can see Homer is now leaving his home and concluding that if Marge isn't his soulmate, then they've got to be out there somewhere. And he walks away sadly into the darkness of night. And that brings us to the end of our second act. We will be back for Act 3 to pull you out of these depths of depression and find Homer's soulmate in just a few moments.
Hello, Best Darn Diddly listeners. It's Mike Reese. I've been writing for The Simpsons for 30 years. I ran the show in seasons 3 and 4. I created The Critic. And now I've written a book. It's called Springfield Confidential, and it is the first insider's look at The Simpsons. It's filled with secrets, scandals, and tales of censorship and celebrities. It's a great book. It's like a Simpsons episode. It's fast, it's smart, and it's packed with hundreds of jokes, some of them funny. Please buy Springfield Confidential. You can order it now on Amazon.com.
We open up our third act, and you know, Rich, I have to say I'm proud of The Simpsons for being progressive on the stance of mental health, helping out people with mental health, because Homer is clearly in need of therapy, and I'm glad to see that he made the responsible decision to seek out a therapist to talk about his problems. We see that he's laying on a sofa talking to a very well-dressed man. I always just figured that my wife was my soulmate. But if it's not Marge, then who is it? Where do I begin looking?
This really goes beyond my training as a furniture salesman, sir. Now, if you don't want the sofa, I'll have to ask you to leave.
And we see that Homer is not at a mental health professional's care. No, he is at a 24-hour furniture store.
The worst business model ever.
So he has a better idea, I must say, when he goes to Moe's to try to find a soulmate. He starts with Barney. Hey, Barney, how about I buy you a beer, soulmate?
I'm really more of a chum.
Which leads Homer going around the room getting an excuse from every one of the barflies. Lenny says he's more of a croonie, Carl an acquaintance, Larry a colleague, Sam a sympathizer, Bumblebee Man a compadre. Kearney an associate, and Hibbert a contemporary. finally leaving Mo to explain that he's more of a well-wisher, and that I don't wish you any specific harm.
I love that one. And then comes the joke that no child would ever get.
It's Homer in a phone booth.
Hello? Is this GBM? Yeah. I read in the personals that you were seeking a soulmate. Well, I also like rainy days and movies. No, I don't like that. Or that. No, it's not that I'm afraid. I'm going to hang up now. Bye-bye.
Click. Homer gets very scared very fast.
And for those of you that don't understand, GBM stands for gay black male. So Homer was responding to a personal ad for a gay black male, or from a gay black male. And when I did some, I don't want to say research, but when I Googled the term online in Urban Dictionary, it actually brought up the reference in this exact episode was the first thing. So it looks like this episode gave that phrase a lot more notoriety because of it. So I definitely didn't get that joke when I was a kid.
Well, and I think that a lot of these are lost to the relic that is like the dating articles or the personal ads, you would call them, or like even dating services that they used to have back in the 90s. A lot different than your smart. First of all, there wasn't smartphones, so like Tinder or any of the hookup.
There was only payphones.
I guess GBM would have been more a grinder thing, but either way, that didn't exist. So you would actually buy personal ads, and a lot of times you'd be charged like per line or per letter. So by doing these, and also it just gets really wordy. So like this would be GBM or single white female. There's a popular movie made about that too. All of those are just kind of shorthand abbreviations to help you find what you're looking for.
And Homer thought he found his soulmate for a second.
He was looking maybe in the wrong holes for a soulmate.
Ooh. Bye-bye.
Not saying they're wrong. I just mean wrong for him. To clarify.
Oh, I give up.
Find your soulmate, Homer. Find your soulmate.
Where? Where?
This is just your memory. I can't give you any new information.
I mean, to be fair, the whole trip was just his brain as well, so.
That's true, but I mean, at the time, he was exploring his brain in a different way. Homer continues his search. He walks in first into a Mayor Quimby campaign headquarters because it has the banner, "Your best friend in government," but almost as quickly as he rushes in, he's thrown out by security. Next up, in front of a pet shop, he sees two kissing fish, and it's really sweet at first when these fish are lip-locking, much like Lisa and Nelson did a few weeks ago, but this ended much differently, as one of the fish literally ate the other, and then I love the sinister little look it gives right into the camera.
Is that the evil fish that'll eventually get a role in South Park?
Maybe. Spooky fish?
Yeah.
He even turns to the community outreach office where he is also kicked out because as soon as he shows up, it has an arms open sign that's immediately flipped to a "we're full" sign.
Oh.
And last but not least, it leads Homer all the way to the docks, where off in the distance he sees a blinking light, and it turns out it's the lighthouse. And where else could he find a friend but possibly the loneliest man in all of Springfield, the lighthouse keeper? I love that Homer doesn't walk around to the lighthouse. He makes a dead shot that the high tide just rushes right over him. So we see him crawling out of the rocks covered in seaweed and starfish as he approaches this lighthouse.
I mean, he always has those interactions with starfish.
That's true, that's right, from Peppy.
I love you, Pepsi.
Peppy. The lighthouse has a sign on it that says it's operated by Earl, and this makes Homer so happy. "Here I come, buddy! No more loneliness for Homer and Earl!" And he goes sprinting up the stairs, only to find nothing but a computer with the name Earl written out electronic, automatic, robotic lighthouse.
A machine? Earl's a machine? Oh, that's just perfect. Homer's desperate search for a soulmate has yielded a lighthouse-keeping robot. Oh, wow.
And in this moment, Homer's standing in a way that the lighthouse light is shining through him into the sky, projecting a Homer signal that Bart actually even looks up in the sky and says, "Hey, look, is that Dad?"
Either that or Batman's really let himself go.
Great joke. But in the lighthouse itself, you can kind of see that Homer is starting to lose it a little bit. Not in like the trippy way that he did so earlier, but in that his depression and his search for love or a soulmate is starting to drive him a bit mad. And when he notices that there's a ship out in the harbor approaching the rocks, instead of letting the light alert it to danger, he realizes if I break the light, the people on that ship will come to me. And we actually see out in the ship itself that it's the boat captain McAllister and his first mate.
I really like the line Homer says right before he has that realization, too. It's a very cool line, I think. I'm a lonely, insignificant speck of a has-been planet orbited by a cold, indifferent sun.
It's way too accurate, man. Like, yeah. I get that all the way.
Whoever came up with that line, I don't know why, I just love that line.
I completely, I'm glad you called that one back because I skipped over it, and that's a great line, and I feel it's all too true a lot of the times. But hey, do whatever you want. You're all gonna die soon anyway.
Our matey.
And that's actually who we cut to, is Boat Captain McAllister.
Our matey. Nary a warning light to be seen. 'Tis clear sailing ahead for our precious cargo.
Would that be the hot pants, sir?
Aye, the hot pants.
Back in the lighthouse, we see it's got a little bit of a horror vibe going on. We get some creepy music, and Homer has got kind of almost a, what would I say? I don't want to get sued, so we'll
Psycho?
call it the shinning.
Oh, okay. That's more accurate. Yeah, I like.
He's got a little bit of a shinning vibe going on. At that moment, though, we hear footsteps coming up the lighthouse stairs, and it turns out when the door swings open, it's none other than Marge.
Marge? How did you find me?
Well, I was sure you'd be on foot because you always say public transportation is for losers. And I was sure you'd head west because Springfield slopes down that way. And then I saw the lighthouse and I remembered how you love blinking lights, like the ones in the waffle iron.
Or that little guy on the don't walk sign.
I love the idea that Homer only goes west because there's a slight incline in that direction. That also hits all too real with people I know.
Wow, Marge, you really do understand me. See, I thought we weren't soulmates because...
We had a fight?
Right, and we don't like the same things. It's like you're from Venus.
And you're from Mars.
Oh, sure, give me the one with all the monsters.
But Homer pretty quickly realizes that she didn't mean it in a mean way.
We really do have a profound mystical understanding. Oh, Marge, we're number one! We're number one! In your face, Space Coyote!
Space Coyote? Another just fantastic moment. I love this just because I feel like it represents who Homer is so much. He just wants his little happy slice of life to be as minimally chaotic as possible. And then he's immediately happy to tout about how awesome it is once it's back and restored. And then just the Space Coyote line is wonderful. But you've got to wonder, how many times on a daily basis does Marge have similar thoughts like that? Like, what the fuck is he talking about?
But we know, Miles, we know.
Homer's celebration is cut short as they remember, or they're reminded by it, like, honking its horns and whatnot, that ship is now sailing right at the lighthouse, and it is on a collision course. But Marge is quick to jump into action. She actually goes to the under the light storage cabinet and finds replacement light bulbs.
Sylvania makes some big-ass light bulbs.
It's funny because they're drawn just like a Sylvania light bulb box, which all of us have probably, or at least if you're in the United States, I can't speak to other countries, but Sylvania is a very popular brand of light bulb here, especially in a commercial building type of thing where there's a lot of light bulbs replaced on a regular basis. And I also really appreciate that they took the time to animate the empty one because people are assholes and they always put the empty packaging back in the cabinets.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Or again, that could just be the American way. The light is restored, and immediately McAllister realizes that they are going to crash.
Jonathan Livingston Seagull, we're on a collision course. Hard a starboard.
Port?
Aye, port.
So the ship turns, but it's too late. It was not able to miss the rocks, but it was able to miss the lighthouse at least. It veered off and crashed, spilling the precious cargo into the harbor. Chief Wiggum shows up for some crowd control, but he's very excited when he sees, look at all them hot pants.
Hey, who likes short shorts?
We like short shorts. And the credits actually play over the silhouette of Marge and Homer kissing, very much like the Homer signal earlier. This time it's them embracing it as soulmates, as they should be, as We Love Short Shorts plays over the closing credits. And that actually brings us to the end of our third act and to the episode El Viaje Misterioso de Nuestro, Jomer. Richie, is there anything else that you or that book of yours want to point out before we call it a day?
My book, The Simpsons, A Complete Guide to Our Favorite Family, points out that there's a dude selling water at the chili cook-off for $3 per bottle.
Capitalism. Nice.
In today's standards, that's pretty cheap, but back in late 90s dollars, that's pretty expensive. I want to continue on my Heisenberg Homer conspiracy here about the counterfeit pants. I think this is all planned out by Homer. He has another retailer coming in to sell short shorts or some kind of pants, and yet mysteriously the ship and cargo both get wrecked so that no money will be made off these. Is that a coincidence? I think not.
He's sending a message, I see.
Yeah.
All under the guise of a drug
all
trip.
These pants things going on with Homer? Like, he is Heisenberg in the counterfeit gene business.
Maybe with our next week's episode, we can find if the truth is out there, Richie. We'll tease that there for right now.
I like that. But that's all I got for this one, Miles. What about you?
One more thing, real fun little fact from the end credits where they're playing the We Like Short Short song. That song was actually written by Al Cooper, who is in fact the music director for Matt Groening's very own band, the Rock Bottom Remainders.
Ooh, really now?
It's just a fun tie-in. I don't have any idea who Al Cooper is, and I can't say that I follow the Rock Bottom Remainders, but Matt Groening is in that band, and just being able to bring in, another artist that he's collaborated with, I think is always a cool thing to learn about.
Absolutely, yeah. The more you know, the better, and that's what our podcast is all about.
That will do it for this week's podcast. Richie and I again want to thank you so much for joining us on this journey through The Simpsons, the Golden Age, and beyond.
You can follow our show at Best Darn Diddly. That's DIDDLY. Follow me at TheWiz_Kid23. Follow Miles at Mr. Most Days Off.
And most importantly, come back and join us again next week. Richie and I will be back, and we'll have some special guests along the way.
Oh, no.
We're going to be talking about a very fun episode. Believe it or not, it's rated a 9.1 out of 10 on IMDb, and that's only good enough to make it the third highest rated episode of this season. We're going to be breaking down the Springfield Files next week.
So make sure you bring your space coyotes.
And until next time, be cromulent to each other.